Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And today we're going to talk about the Dungeons and Dragons fighter and their second wind. So what I want you to do is I want you to turn to the Player's Handbook. Now on page 72 of the Player's Handbook there is a section that discusses and talks about the second wind. It's very, very simple. It's actually only just a couple of sentences and it reads as such. You have a limited well of stamina that you can draw on to protect yourself from harm. On your turn, you can use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10, which is a 10-sided dice, plus your fighter level. Not your character level, but your fighter level, so it's dependent on that. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. So very, very simple, not very difficult to understand. So why do we even have to go into it at all whatsoever? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through it and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the sage advice that has been provided by Jeremy Crawford and Mike Mills. So first off, if we're starting off in a castle and our fighter is trying to fight its way into a Gnoll castle, the Gnolls have taken over and they've taken a bit of damage because they're up close and they're dealing with spears and so forth, and it's needing to start regaining a few hit points, you can do so. So you can make an attack with your action, you can move if you needed to move, and you can also use your bonus action to take that second wind because that's what it's there for. So roll a 10-sided dice. 10-sided dice. 10-sided dice. I rolled a 8 and you can take that 8 and add that to the modifier for your level, which is only 1 in this case. So 8 plus 1 equals 9. And that is how many hit points you regain. Now, no matter how you use this feature, you can never regain more hit points than you have as a maximum. So if you're going to wind up with more hit points back than you would normally have, then it doesn't work that way and it's not going to help you. Okay, so if I was a level 3 fighter, it changes. So I'm not adding a 10-sided dice to 1, I'm adding a 10-sided dice to 3 because that's my fighter level. So I roll my 10-sided dice. I rolled a 1 in this case. It's not very good this time. So 3 plus 1 comes to 4. And there we go. That's how many hit points we get back through using our bonus action. So you can see it's a very good feature. It's something that you should certainly consider using. Don't forget that you have it. Now, a couple of questions that can come up with sage advice that have been talked about in the past. So second wind can be used out of combat. So it definitely states in the book that it's on your turn. And there's been a few arguments between dungeon masters and players, and even I have had to wrestle with this before, but you can use second wind outside of combat, which means it won't be done on your turn. It is indicated by Mike Mills and Sage Advice for those of you who are wondering where that information came from. And for those of you who are wondering, what about the durable feat? Does it affect how you use your second wind? No, it doesn't. The durable feat does not affect the way that second wind works. Second wind still works exactly the same way I just described, and this is because second wind does not use up hit dice. Now, that's another question that people tend to have, and that is, do I actually wind up using up my hit dice when I use a second wind? No, because there's no hit dice used whatsoever. It is a feature for the fighter. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, I know what you're thinking. Fred, that just wasn't enough. Where is the rest? Do I not get to have a look at a combat between the Gnolls and the fighter? Well, as it happens, yes you do, because I would not be that cruel and say that I would do it and then not do it. But what I am currently doing is rubbing things out. Now, you'll find I'm using the Dungeons and Dragons monster cards to run my Gnoll, so it's nice and easy and simple for me. What I'm doing is I'm using the character sheet from the Dungeons and Dragons starter set, the fighter level 1. So if you're wondering where I'm getting all of my maths from, that is where I'm getting all of my maths with regard to the fighter. So if you're wanting to sort of check anything, now I believe the fighter that I'm using out of that box is the noble, because they had a better modifier for attacking in terms of up close. So it seemed like a sensible thing to do. So let us return to our battle scene. This is where Now, normally if you were fighting two Gnolls and it was just you at level 1 and you were a fighter, sticking around in the battle would be like a bad idea. So seriously stupid, right? But what has happened is there's a castle that's been taken over by Gnolls, and the group are sort of fanning out, and the fighter, for whatever reason, has decided they were capable of sort of dealing with things themselves. They've opened one of the doors and barged through, and only to find there are some Gnolls behind the door. Thought there was only one because they were listening at the door, but there's actually two Gnolls rather than one Gnoll. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll initiative and see what happens. This is always the fun part, right? This is always the fun part. So starting off with our first character, we'll start off with the fighter. Now the fighter only has a modifier for their initiative of -1. They're not very good. They're not very good with dexterity, so that's the dexterity modifier. So we'll roll that. I rolled a 3, so -1 plus 3. No, that's a 13, Fred. That's a 13, so that's 12. So there is the initiative for our fighter. And we'll just make a note of that so that I've got it correctly on my sheet over here. The Gnolls don't roll for every single Gnoll. Just because there's two Gnolls does not mean we need to roll for every single Gnoll. So just don't even think about doing that. That's a waste of your time. Besides, if you wind up with 6 Gnolls to control all at once, that's going to take up even more time and more energy. So I don't recommend that. So the modifier for the Gnoll is a +1, and we roll our 20-sided dice. I rolled a 1. Okay, so that's 1 plus 1 is 2. So they have a very low initiative modifier. There we go. And their score is very low. I've got to be careful about my wording in terms of score and modifier, because they're not really the same thing, are they? Okay, there we go. So that means we've got to place them into order. Remember, highest numbers at the top, lowest number at the bottom in terms of determining who goes first. So with the fighter having a 12, they're going to get to go first. They'll be at the top of the initiative. We could say that the Gnoll has the Gnolls are surprised, but since I didn't bother doing that, and also too, it's going to be I don't really want to make it more complicated than I absolutely need to if I can help it. I've done so many videos on surprise that I feel like re-examining that particular area would be a bit of a pain. And plus, I've already rolled initiative as it is. So 12 for the fighter, and then next is the Gnolls. And the Gnolls have a 2. And we're spectacular. Not a very great number, but that's all right. Okay, so we'll place that just there. That should allow you to see what's going on, and I can still roll my dice down here, or can I put it over there? Well, there we go. That's probably as good as I can get at present. Okay, so we'll mark it. We're starting at the top of the initiative, and we're going to get our fighter to take their first action. Now, there's a couple of things that the fighter can do. They have access to basically a javelin, I believe, and they also have a great axe. Forget about the miniature. We're going to use the great axe because we're up close. So we're going to get ourselves a 12-sided dice, which should be over here. And we're adding a +3 to that for our first attack. And we only get one attack at level 1. So if you're wondering how many attacks you would get, it's only going to be the 1. So fighter, I'll go great axe. Great axe. And there is a... Now the modifier for the attack is a +5. And so we're going to make the attack first, Fred, not the damage, the attack. So we're rolling 5 for the attack modifier plus a 20-sided dice roll. Okay, I rolled a 7. So 5 plus 7 is 12. It needs to be equal to or greater than the armor class of our Gnolls. Our Gnolls have an armor class of 15 because they are wearing shields and they have hide armor. So as you can see, that there is going to result in there being a... Probably going to have to make sure I stick it sort of over the initiative for a second. So you can see that the attack is going to miss because it only came to 12, and you need to get equal to or greater than to actually hit the target. Okay, so that is the fighter. They've taken their turn. They then yell out for help because they are dealing with 2 opponents rather than just one. And we'll move down to the Gnolls and we'll have their turn. Now, with regard to the Gnolls, they have a couple of different weapons. They have a bite, a spear, and they also have, I believe it's a longbow. Now, longbow is not going to be much good to us, and it doesn't really do that much damage, but we could use it, and they're not very good with it. But they are better with their spear and their bite. Their bite doesn't do a lot of damage, but the spear does. Now, they're using it single-handedly. If I was using it with two hands, I would get to add +2 to my damage, but I'm not using it as a versatile weapon to stab. What I'm doing is I'm using it as just a single-handed melee weapon. So our spear attack for the Gnolls will make... Now the attack modifier for them is a 4 plus whatever we roll on a 20-sided dice. So we'll do that now. So first attack. Now I'm going to move this one up. So they're both up close, and we attack. And I get a 5 for the first one, so 4 plus 5 is 9. Okay, will that hit the armor class of our fighter? I very much doubt it, actually. I think the armor class is 17 for the fighter, so yes. 9 is certainly less, that misses. And then the next one is a 2. Everybody's missing today. Maybe I should move to a different dice. If I move to a different dice, will it help? Okay, so as you can see from that, those attacks have missed. Fortunately for us, the fighter will get to stick around a little bit longer. Okay, they only get one attack. There's no multi-attack with the Gnoll, which is kind of fortunate. So now we'll move around. Now they might have called out for their buddies as well in Gnollish, and then we move on to the fighter. That's round 2, and we continue on. So we're going to continue using our Great Axe because it seems like it's the most sensible thing to do. We only have a couple of options. Now we could decide at this point that it's better off to flee. You know, we're dealing with 2 opponents. We could flee, but remember, even though you're level 1, you still have, the fighter has a total of 12 hit points. On average, the Gnolls are probably going to do, if they're really lucky, they maybe do 5 points of hit, 5 points each. And that still gives you time to use your second wind to recoup some hit points. So you could probably stand there for a little while before you have to start making hard decisions about getting out of dodge. But we don't have to do that just yet. Remember, fleeing from combat when there's nobody else to hold the line is always a bad thing to do. Okay, so let us go with our Great Axe. I'm going to grab our Great Axe and make an attack with that. One Great Axe for our fighter. And they are using a +5. Roll our 20-sided dice. We've got a 5. Man, I could be sitting here and not hitting for quite a long time by the looks. So as you can see, now 5 is less than the armor class of our Gnolls at 15. So we don't hit with the Great Axe. If we go with too many rounds like this, I'm just going to say, gonna give it up. It's always boring when things don't connect. I do remember when they were developing Dungeons & Dragons Next, they were talking about making sure that even with a miss, you would do damage or you would reduce hit points so that combats would not fall into this trap of consistently waiting for somebody to finally hit and cause damage, because it does happen from time to time. Okay, it is now the Gnoll's turn. We're on round 2, and they are going to make spear attacks just as they did before, calling out for their buddies. They are like a demonic creature, so and of course they tend to spread. So if there are hyenas near close by, that they tend to wind up transforming into a Gnoll. Okay, so first attack, we roll a 20-sided dice and add our +4. So that is 11 plus 4 is 15 for the first attack. And we'll make our second attack from the second Gnoll, and I get a 6. And that is a 10. Oh, it goes on and on. The continuing pattern. So, as you can see, the Gnolls have both missed. 15 and 10 for their attacks is less than the armor class of the fighter at 17. So yet again, another round of nobody hitting anybody. Okay, so we're going to go into round 3. Trust me, if we're not going past round 3. After that, I've had enough. Well and truly. Okay, so we're going to go on to the fighter, and they're going to make an attack as well. I'm going to use our great axe again. They are calling out loudly for help and assistance. They know that their friends or party members are close by because they are also in the castle location. And one great axe attack. Okay, and we're going to be adding 5 to whatever we roll on our 20-sided dice. Haven't even had a chance to worry about using something like Second Wind in this particular encounter. Okay, making an attack with the fighter. We get a 17. Oh, finally, there's going to be some blood. All right, so 5 plus 17 is 22. 22 is greater than or equal to the armor class of our Gnolls. Thankfully, finally, something has happened. So that means that they are going to be hit. We're going to hit this one over here because this one in the corner would have partial cover. I usually apply partial cover with corners of walls and so forth. It's really up to you if you feel that that's not appropriate, but I usually do that, and I'll explain to you some other time because this is not really a cover rule video as such. I'll do that with some pictures and images that I sort out at some other later date. Okay, so we strike this one and we're going to do some damage. So our damage is the 12-sided dice, not the 20-sided dice, which I almost tried to roll for making an attack before. So now our modifier, what we add to that 12-sided dice is a 3. I'm going to be doing slashing damage, 3. And we roll that dice. I rolled an 8. There we go. So 3 plus 8 comes to a grand total of 11. That means that the Gnoll is going to take 11 hit points of slashing. Boom, they just get whacked. Now, they have 22 hit points. Gnolls have 22 hit points. It's a challenge rating half, so they're going to lose half their hit points. At that point, usually with most monsters, I will have them run away once they lose about half of their hit points. With something like a Gnoll, it's a little bit different. They're not stupid creatures, okay? They're not completely stupid, but the problem is with something like a creature like this is that they are driven by this strange rampaging sense to just destroy and annihilate everything. This is sort of part of the problem of their ancestry coming from a demon. So I would normally play out a Gnoll as fighting until they die, no matter what the odds are, and just snarling and dribbling the whole time. Okay, so I'm going to finish it there. I don't want to go any further. What happens at this present time is the other party members show up and the combat can continue as you see fit. I could make attacks with the Gnolls, but I just can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. It took me so many rounds just to get to that point.